Introduce. Here we go. Again, welcome to Leadership Dolce, Sweet Morsels of Wisdom. So today, this episode is all about unleashing your powerful voice. And my guest today is Anouska Taylor, and we share something really unique. We are both certified Jungian coaches, which means we were trained utilizing the theories of Carl Jung. So I've got so many technical things going on. Now the sun just wants to be in my face. I even closed the blinds. It's great. It's great. The unknown, right? That is what we learn as Jungian coaches, to really be able to thrive in the unknown. So Anouska is also an experienced London-based voice teacher and a professional singer. And she's been training clients for over a decade to find the full potential of their unique voice. And she combines 4 key areas in her training, which I really love: physiology, vocal technique, paralinguistics, and Jungian psychology. She is a faculty member for the Albright Academy in London and a member of both the British Voice Association and the Association of Teachers of Singing. And I am going to share some ways you can connect with her in the comments below today's interview. So welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, it's so good to be here. And it was so funny, as soon as you said 8 o'clock hits, then all the technical issues started.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I said, the moment I go live, people will start popping in the room and everything's going to go haywire. But that's life, right?
Right.
So I'd love to know what the #1 challenge you find professionals have with their speaking voice.
So when I was thinking about this question, in my experience, I think, well, it's also partly a misunderstanding of the voice, but for me, it's a low pitch equals more power. And I think that idea comes from this idea sort of from an evolutionary perspective and a sort of social perspective, because of course, a deeper voice gives the illusion of a bigger body, and a bigger body means more powerful. So our ancestors could scare off potential threats and predators if we had this deeper voice. And, we see that in the musical world. A double bass is a big instrument. It's a deeper sound versus a small sort of violin. It's a kind of higher pitched sound. So we see it. Unfortunately, it doesn't really correlate so well when we take that too literally, that if we drop our pitch too low, particularly with women, but I think men do this too, when we drop our pitch too low, we create all kinds of problems with our voice. Things like, for example, we're more likely to strain, there's more likely to be excessive tension, the voice is more likely to fatigue, more likely to have raspy, croaky, that kind of vocal fry sound that a lot of people can experience. So one of the things that I think is this misunderstanding that I need to really kind of lower my pitch. And I think as I say, I do think men do this too, but I think for women, particularly in male dominated industries where they feel like they're sort of needing to have more presence and more authority, then there's this tendency if I just lower my pitch. But I would argue that actually, if you speak from your natural pitch, you can get a lot more power naturally, a lot more richness and a lot more depth. And that's one of the things that I teach my clients. And your voice is just going to last longer, apart from anything else, but you're also using your sort of authentic voice. You're not trying to artificially lower it because, and it does make sense. I mean, socially, it makes sense. We know there's loads of research done on this topic. Actually, I wrote this guy's name down, David Putz, professor of anthropology and evolutionary psychology at Penn State University. He did some research on this whole idea of lowering pitch, and men, when they were speaking to men that they perceived to be inferior to them, would lower their pitch, and then men that felt more inferior would kind of raise their pitch. So we know that there's all of this sort of social and evolutionary stuff going on. So it does make sense, but from a voice perspective, it's very limiting.
I think it's amazing that you that you've just said that, because I've never heard that before. And I am originally from Brooklyn, and I took diction classes when I was in acting school, and I took them very seriously. But if I were to speak with perfect diction, I would sound like this. And it was that incredible lowering of my voice, and it felt so unnatural for me. It helped to get rid of my accent, but I felt like I needed to bring my pitch back up. But I always thought I was speaking incorrectly. I thought I was supposed to speak the way that I just showed you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, I think there's just a misunderstanding and just a miseducation, because most people don't study this stuff. So why would you know? But also, I think there are other reasons why you might think your pitch is high. So if the vocal tract is constricted, it gives the illusion of a higher pitch. So you might be lowering a pitch when you don't really need to lower it, when actually just releasing some of the constriction in the voice, in the vocal tract, would actually just naturally deepen your voice. So there's so many things. I would say that's the number one thing, because it feeds into so many problems, particularly if you're speaking a lot every day. And they're the women I work with primarily. So
that's awesome. Which leads me actually to my next question is, what would you say to someone who doesn't like the way they sound? You know, sometimes people see themselves on video, we're on Zoom all the time, and people always say, oh, I hate the way I sound when I listen to my voice. What would you say to someone who says that?
No, I hear this all the time as well. Well, I'm probably going to answer this in a sort of strange way, but I'm going to say, become intimate with your own voice, because it's unlikely that you hate everything about your voice. And if you just write off your entire voice, it's a very disempowering place to be. So one of the things I suggest is listen to an audio of your voice, but from a sort of non-judgment perspective, and actually get crystal clear on what is it that I don't like, versus just saying, I don't like my voice. Is it, for example, you feel like you're too nasal, you're too squeaky, you're too loud, you're too soft, you're too quiet, you're raspy, you're mumbling, like what is it? And then you can actually work on that versus, I hate my voice, it's terrible, there's nothing I can do about it.
Great. So here's a question that, I love, and I'm sure you love too. How does our conscious mind and our unconscious mind feed into our voice?
Yeah, so this is a big topic, but I'll try and keep it simple. So from Jung's perspective, we have a persona, and this is the sort of the psychological clothing we wear in the world to fit in, be accepted, to be liked, etc. The voice forms part of that persona, and persona actually means through sound. So literally the voice is an integral part of our persona. And so it's the conscious and unconscious parts of our mind really do leave a footprint on the voice, because our voice literally is living in our neck, which is the bridge between our body and our mind. And so because the persona is all about survival, is all about fitting in, the voice is also really fundamentally a tool from an evolutionary perspective, at least, again, coming back to evolution, of survival. I mean, we think about our ancestors, they would use their voice to, if there was a tiger coming and we had to kind of, tell people to get out of the way, or there's danger, it was quicker to use your voice than write something down or do a dance or something like that. You could just shout quickly, particularly if it was dark or you can't see the person. And then emotionally, of course, we use our voice to connect, to tell stories, to engage with people. So the voice is so intrinsically sort of linked to our survival. And so we do use it, therefore, particularly when we're overly identified with our persona as being us, we do then use it to try and fit in. And we know that we do that to some extent. I mean, I do it too. We shift our voice depending on, am I in a business meeting? Am I talking to my cat? Am I talking to my child? Am I on a date? Like, our voice changes. I mean, there's subtle changes depending on what we're doing. Yeah. But the unconscious parts, which is what I really help people with, because we're usually aware that we are shifting our voice to some extent. It's the unconscious sort of habitual patterns that is what I help clients with particularly. And that could be something like maybe your voice is very weak and very quiet, or maybe you mumble a lot, or maybe you always shout and it's very loud and it's very sort of strained. And, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's some very famous people out there that have very big, straining, loud voices. And and so there's all of that. And we have to kind of look at unconsciously what's driving that, because in some way that voice use is protecting us.
How much of that do you think is emulated in what our parents did, like the loudness or the lowness or some of the vocal quality that we project? Is that just us picking up from what was around us, or how much of it is from conditioning?
All of the above. I mean, of course, if you were in a home where you were perhaps told children are seen and not heard, for example, you could go either way. So you could you could really shut down your voice and just become very quiet and your voice could become very sort of quiet and sort of held back. Or you could overcompensate and be like, I want to be heard, I want to be noticed, and go the other way. So it really depends on the conditioning and how you made sense of that environment. But all of that, everything shapes us, our environment. Obviously we are picking up when we're learning how to speak, we're watching and listening to our caregivers. How do they use their voice? In terms of accent, that's how we pick up accent. We're just listening to people around us. I mean, it is incredible how we learn language, and we're literally just learning it, our little sponges. We're just hearing it and just absorbing it, and we're even absorbing it in the womb. I mean, it's amazing. So it's so multi-layered. It really depends on the individual, which is why when I do this work, it's so personal, because just because you grew up in a home where you were told to not speak doesn't necessarily mean you'll shut your voice down. You could go the other way, for example.
Yeah, it was so interesting what you were saying too about our voice being part of our survival technique. I couldn't speak for 2 weeks because I had an injury. I was starting to get nodes on my vocal cords, and I never felt so vulnerable. I had a pad and a pen with me all the time, but I really didn't go out that much because I felt so incredibly vulnerable because I couldn't speak at all. And we don't realize how much we also use it for protection. And it was incredible.
Well, and if you think about it, when we get nervous, for most of us, we get nervous public speaking. I think that's a fairly common anxiety. One of the first things to happen is the throat tends to constrict. And it's really a protection. It's like literally trying to stop the voice coming out, because the ego is like, this is dangerous, don't speak, you might make a fool of yourself, people might laugh, people might criticize. So but when we understand what's really driving it, then we can do some work. I mean, I guess I work on it from both ends of the spectrum, because I understand the sort of vocal mechanism and can help people release the voice, open the voice, find a more powerful place to speak from. But we've also got to work from it from this sort of mind perspective, because otherwise I can help you release those muscles in the throat, but then you're just going to constrict them again.
Yeah, that I'm sure you know this, that they've done studies, and people are more afraid of public speaking than death. It ranks higher than death.
I know, and it makes sense. I mean, in a way, because it's very vulnerable, and that's what we fear more than anything, is being exposed. The persona is all about trying to be accepted and fit in. And when we speak, we are using our voice, which is really just an incredibly personal part of ourselves. I mean, we are our instrument. So it's not, I mean, I play the piano, so I'm not dissing anyone that plays an instrument at all, but it's almost like, I have a piano and you could play my piano, or someone else could play my piano. And so it takes away that sort of personal nature of it. But my voice, I'm the only one that sounds like me. I'm the only one that has this exact vocal tract, these size vocal folds. I am unique, and all our voices are unique for that reason. So it's incredibly personal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how can someone access their powerful voice?
Well, I mean, there is obviously, individual ways I would work with people in terms of the sort of technical aspects and looking at physiologically what are they doing, for example. But I do think the more powerful place to start from is looking at how your voice is protecting you, looking at what your voice is, what kind of voice persona you have, and what are you pushing away. Because then you're really free to create your voice versus I can only speak loud, I can only speak quiet, I can only mumble, I can only do this, I can only do that. I think then you are really, really free. And then any kind of training you do to strengthen the muscles in the voice, to breathe from a sort of deeper place versus this kind of shallow breathing that we tend to do again when we're nervous, that all then really kind of adds to this opening of a voice. Because as I said, the mind is really driving everything anyway. So looking at the voice, I think that's probably the most powerful thing you can do. So one of the ways you can do that is when you're listening to your voice, like get some audio, it doesn't have to be long, just listen to your voice and just make a note of some of the words that come to mind when you listen to your voice and be as specific as you can. And then what is the word that has the sort of strongest emotional reaction for you? So I'm using the example of, let's say you mumble as an example. So what would be the opposite of mumbling? So it would be a kind of clear, distinct, strong diction, that type of thing. And then start to think about, okay, what kind of person has that voice? What kind of person speaks with that kind of clarity and that, incredible diction? What kind of person is that? And really start to get in touch with that person, because they are pointing to something in your shadow and what you reject and what you fear about having that in your own voice. So that's a good place to start.
Can we take that one step further? And do you have an example of, let's say, someone, not necessarily that you admire, or that's like you would just pick someone so we could go through those steps a little bit?
Let me think. So someone that you'd all know, you mean?
Yeah, if you have an example of someone that let's say you think that they have a great speaking voice and command a room and good diction.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. So you want me to give you an example of someone that I think speaks well? Yeah.
And isn't that what you were saying, that they would be reflecting perhaps something that's in someone's shadow?
Well, it is. So what I'm saying is to look at your own voice and how would you describe your voice? And then whatever is kind of the opposite of that is pointing to what's in your shadow. So if you're someone that mumbles, for example, there's something about having a clear voice that's a threat to you. And so it would then be looking at what kind of person has a clear voice. I'm just using this as an example. And what is so fearful in me about that? Perhaps that person, I'm sort of loath to use my clients' examples in case they're listening.
We can use me if you want, just to have some fun. I really get triggered by people that interrupt me. And I can say that I probably get triggered by people that interrupt me because I felt like I needed to be nice and let everyone speak, right? And allow them to interrupt me in that sense. So they're bold, they have bold voices, and they don't have any fear around being heard.
And so how do you feel that reflects in your voice now? Like your voice persona, how would you describe your voice now?
I generally like my voice. I've done a lot of work on it, but I think when I get nervous, I tend to go back to my old ways of speaking. My Brooklyn accent will come out a little bit more. I'll probably maybe get a little bit more nasal in my tonality.
Right. Okay. So I suppose so if I was using you as an example, that's where I would start. I would say, okay, describe your voice to me. What out of those descriptive words would you say has the strongest sort of emotional reaction for you? So is there something in your voice right now that you feel I mean, I can tell you what I think, but it's more about your own perception of your voice.
I think it's my ums annoy me, and when I go into my Brooklyn accent, it annoys me.
And so what kind of person ums?
Someone nervous who can't pause, who isn't confident enough to just pause between thoughts.
Yeah, so it kind of feeds into what you were saying before. You're triggered by people that interrupt you, but then you kind of, just using this as a very, very brief example, but then you're creating a voice that allows itself to be interrupted because you're umming and ahhing, for example.
Great.
Versus actually just owning your voice, speaking powerfully, speaking confidently. Let's say people can't interrupt you because you're speaking, but if you're umming and ahhing all the time, there's lots of opportunity for people to interject, and on some level you're saying, interrupt me.
Amazing.
But that's just a very simple example. I mean, obviously there's many layers, as you would appreciate. This is not like a 2-second quick fix thing. There's many layers to this, but it will always show up in our voice, and that's why we have to become kind of intimate with our own voice. Like, what is, and it's not really about what I think of your voice, it's about how you relate to your voice. I mean, I can tell you sort of based on, I mean, if someone comes to me and says they have, say, for example, a lot of fatigue in their voice, or, a lot of strain, I can absolutely help with all of that. And that would suggest things to me about their voice persona and what they're pushing away. But ultimately, it's more your relationship with your voice. That's the most important thing.
Thank you for that. So actually, you may have already answered this, but I'll ask anyway. How else are people holding themselves back from utilizing their powerful voice?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of more of the same. I would say also that this mistaken idea that their voice is somehow fixed, and that I hear this all the time, this is just how my voice is. And it's not. I mean, it's highly adaptable to change. So you could be holding yourself back by just not taking any action, not doing anything about it, because you think, I'm too old, I'm too young. I've always spoken like this. This is how my parents speak. This is what we do, blah, 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 blah. Now, I will preface this by saying, if you've had any sort of pathology on your voice, there therefore would be, for example, I mean, I had a lady that had thyroid surgery. She'd had cancer, things like that. Of course, that's a different kettle of fish. But for most people, there isn't pathology on their voice. They haven't had cancer in their thyroid. They haven't had nodules. They haven't had polyps. They haven't had a cyst. They haven't had a hemorrhage. And most people, it's just purely, they just don't know how to use this incredible instrument that they've been given. And it's more of an awareness exercise than that there's actually something fundamentally wrong. And I think this comes back actually full circle to the whole Jungian idea, is there's nothing wrong with us when we don't need to be fixed. We're not broken. And it's the same with our voice. There's nothing wrong. You've just developed a voice that's helped you to survive. If you don't like it, it might be a more survival-based voice. And you can absolutely do something about it. It doesn't mean changing your accent. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly start sounding French if you're German or whatever. It's purely about just releasing and opening your voice. So you keep your authentic nature, all of that stays the same. It's for me, it's never about trying to make you sound like someone else. I actually had a lady, I hope she's not listening to this. She actually did a concert with me and asked me, she wanted to sound like the Duchess of Cambridge. And I said, I think you've got the wrong voice, teacher. I think you've missed the point of what I do. I'm not here to make you sound like royalty.
That's really interesting. That's a nice deep dive, though, into someone's unconscious mind and what aspects of that are coming to the surface for them.
I know. And I said to her, yeah, I said, there's accent coaches. If you want to sound like royalty, there's people that can help you. But that's not, my goal is to make you sound like you, but the best version of you. Authenticity,
one of my favorite new words in my vocabulary. So as we're coming to the end of the Facebook Live, and then we'll move into the Zoom room for our VIPs for some live Q&A and coaching. One more thing I wanted to ask, if someone wanted to do just one action item after today's call, what would you recommend? Because we talked about a lot, which was wonderful.
Yeah, look, I would say, kind of reiterating what I've already mentioned, like listen to an audio of your voice and start to become intimate, and not only in terms of how it sounds, but how it feels. And that's something that I think we're quite disconnected to our voice in terms of, one of the things my clients get, I think I drive them mad. I always say, how does this feel? Where are you feeling it? The feeling is so important, because there's no point having a voice that you think sounds great if it feels really strained or really uncomfortable or really tired. The feeling really drives the sound ultimately. So start to pay attention to, when I'm speaking, does my throat tense? Is my tongue tense? Is my jaw tense? Like, how am I feeling it? Where am I feeling it? Do I feel vibrations in my chest? Is my neck strained? Are my shoulders tense? Is my breathing shallow? Like, there's so many things that we can start to pay attention to. And I think bringing awareness is the first part of anything, as you would know too, in what you do. But it's I think becoming really intimate with your voice is so powerful, because I think we're so critical of ourselves, and then we realize actually it's not all bad. There's just a couple of things I wouldn't mind working on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anouska. This was amazing. We are going to head in to the Leadership Lounge for a little Opera Dolce, where our VIP ticket holders will have a live Q&A with us and maybe a little hot seat coaching. I have posted ways for you to connect with Anouska. And is there something that you'd like to offer to our guests? And I can add a link to that as well after our interview.
So, sorry, I don't know where my eyes are looking now. I've got confused where my camera is. So if you head to my website, anouskataylor.com, you can access a free voice care guide. So that is that would be beneficial to anyone that uses their voice. If you happen to be in the UK and you happen to be near London, I have got an in-person workshop coming up in about 3 weeks, so you can actually work in person with me. So that's exciting, because this is my first in-person event since the world ended a year and a half ago.
That's amazing. Thank you. And yes, so go to Anouska's website, which is posted there in the link for this video. And just very quickly before I go, I wanted to let everyone know, if you missed my course, Speak Up, Quit Hiding in the Shadows and Step into Your Leadership Potential, it is now available as a self-study course with a private one-on-one coaching session with me. So you still get me live and in person for some deep coaching around finding your leadership voice. What I do is very different from Anouska, and you can find all the information. It's in the link in the post as well. So thank you all to everyone on Facebook for being here, and we are going to sign off. And thank you, Anouska.
Thank you.
Okay, we are off Facebook. I'm just going to